I'm not necessarily an expert on the solar construction and whatever. It was just at a point in time when I thought, well, let's see what it takes to produce some of my own electricity. And it's not cheap, but supposedly there's a good return on it. And chances are, like a lot of other energy sources, it's going to get more expensive in the future. If you do have any questions as we go along, if it's something that I have later in the presentation, maybe let you hold off until that point. If it's not, then I guess we can try to answer at the time. Reason that I did this, or a number of reasons, I guess, is first off is I do think that it's important that we do something to deal with our energy problems, the cost of energy, production of energy, and solar is something it's fairly simple. Once you get it up, there's not much maintenance. You don't have to really do anything to it. The sun takes care of all the production. But the only thing you really have to do is if you have a little bit of too much of an angle or a wrong angle on your solar panels, you might have to brush off some snow, which I did quite a few times this year. A lot of times they'll just melt off and slide off, but you have to do that if you expect it to work, and you'll see that in some of the graphs here when I show you the production. I live in Meeker County, and Dan is with the Planning and Zoning in Wright County, so I'm assuming that most of you probably are Wright County. If you are Meeker, then I could answer a few of the questions there, and I don't know what the similarities are between the two counties because it's always different, it seems like. There's no set plan that each county does the same thing, so we'll see what happens as we go along. Let's see. Yeah, go ahead. I thought maybe I could do it from here, and we'll go through these pretty quick. I raised beef cattle there, so keep going. I gave this presentation at the Sustainable Farming Association in Minnesota in 2018, so I'll give you some updates on some stuff, but can we move on? Okay. Remind you of winter there. Keep going. Okay, now we're at the solar part. You can see the date on the bottom there is when I started the construction there on May 23rd, 8:05 in the morning. We had everything laid out. And it goes up pretty fast. Okay, next one. And there's where they're putting those posts in. So they go a long ways into the ground. There's no concrete or anything. They're just right in the ground, and they're still solid as a rock. And the whole system is designed to withstand 90+ mile-an-hour winds. Next. Okay, there's just another one. You can see it doesn't take them a couple hours is all to get to that point there, so it goes pretty fast. Okay, go ahead. I think we took a lunch break there, so it took a little longer. And okay, now we're getting to the meat and potatoes here. The system that I have is a 6.5 kilowatt. There's 26 modules, each producing 250 watts. And by the installer combination of things, primarily the spot that I had, which you can see here, number one, it's very close to the transformer, so we didn't have to trench a lot. It's hooked up to the electric grid there. And then there's a garden down at the bottom here, and then over here, there's a kind of a drop, so it just seemed to be a convenient area to put in. And according to the installer, this would provide about 90% of my electricity. And it's come pretty close along the way there. You'll see when we get to the billing that it's not always the electricity that costs a lot. There's a lot of extra stuff, and maybe it doesn't happen like that in Wright County, but Meeker County, sometimes it's much more for their fixed cost than it is for what the electric that I use there. At the time, the cost was $22,247, and it was a 30% federal tax credit, and that would, I guess, mean like a $15,000, $573 net on that. And I don't recall back then, like in 2016, how much my taxes differed, to be honest with you. I'm just assuming the tax preparer did what she could. So like I say, it's not cheap. The panels themselves are expected to last at least 20, 25 years, and they really don't know how long they will go. Now, they do lose a little bit of production, but it's just a minuscule amount. It's like 0.5% or something like this, maybe to 1%. Depends, of course, on the quality of the panel, but they expect that they last a long time. One thing I asked him about was hail, and he said he's never had an issue with any panels being broken by hail. Fortunately, we haven't had much hail in my area. There has been some, but not real big, maybe occasional quarter size or something like that, and nothing is cracked, so sounds good to me. Okay, next. Okay, this is the, in 2017, the full year of the production there. On this side here, it's January through December, and you can see how it goes up and down. It's kind of a, a bell curve sort of shape there. June and July, of course, are your best times for producing solar. Number one, because the day length is longer, and the position of the sun, is in such a place where it provides a little bit better production there too. When you look at the one on the left here, that's my usage there. And this I can get through the Meeker Cooperative that I go through. There's an app that they have, and I can go into that, and they'll tell me how much energy I use for a particular day or whatever, and it's really pretty handy, so you can kind of compare the two. There's kind of a inverse proportion there to this. You've got your peak here you've got your valley here. So obviously in the summertime when you're getting more solar, it's going to be a lesser amount that you're going to be using from the cooperative or whatever you got there. The dotted line, I don't know if you can read that or not, it's there. That's the temperature, average temperature during those months. But even in the end months, January, December, November, you get some production there, but it's, much reduced from what your better months are, the summer months. Okay, next one. And now I picked two specific months. The one on the left there is July, and this one's December. So you can see by day how much was produced. Now, in July, there's pretty good production even on this, and it's probably a very cloudy day, whatever, but it's still pretty much probably can't read it from here either, but it was on the, looks like the 14th, 15th of July, something like that, that low spot was on the point there. But it was still like about 15 kilowatts or something like that. I can't even read it on this, but you can get the idea there, I guess, what the production is. And then in the December, usually you do have a lot of cloudy days in December, and you also have less sunlight. You know, the days are shorter, so it's obviously going to be less production there. There's one in particular here, the 13th of December. You can just barely see a little bar graph on the bottom there. And I don't remember offhand what was happening that day, but it was probably a pretty good snowstorm. But you got several spots there where they're down. But then towards the end of the month, you've actually got some pretty good production there. And that's over 35 kilowatt hours there. And that's even comparable to some of the ones that we get in the summertime. Next slide. Okay, these are a couple of peak daily production graphs. This one here is well, let's start at this one. This is the one July 2nd. This was the highest amount that was produced any day through the year. It was 45.51 kilowatt hours. You can see that little notch there. What that probably indicates is there was a cloud or two that went by at that time. You know, so you can really see what's happening with this. The same way up in the this one here, you got another little notch, so probably a few clouds came by there too. But that was the highest production in December, which is December 31st, and that put out 31.91 kilowatts there. So about 14 kilowatts less than the July one, but still pretty good production. This one here is pretty sad. That was a December 13th one, and it looks, well, I got a pretty good peak there, but that whole thing for that day produced 310 watt hours, not kilowatt hours, watt hours. So it ran like 300 watt bulbs for whatever length of time, I guess. That's about it. And there was really nothing happening here till about 10:30 in the morning, and then about 3:30 it was done again. So that was probably just a little bit of sunlight coming through the clouds to get that kind of production. But that was pretty meager. Okay, next slide there. This is the actual usage on those same 2 days. The July 2nd, which was the peak, and then the 13th, which was that really bad day. Nothing produced there to speak of. So you got, kind of a low level, just your basic stuff that's running, probably freezers and this and that, whatever. This long one right here, that's when we have breakfast at 7 o'clock, or at least at that time. You got the coffee maker and the frying pan and this and that, whatever. So that shot up there. Whereas after that, then it goes back down again. And then because we got a lot of production during this time, I'm not using any electricity from the power company at all at that point. There's nothing there. And what isn't used, I don't use, what's being produced there is put back into the grid. And then, as I mentioned later, they pay a certain amount for that. So it helps to offset the cost of the bill. I don't recall why this would be a peak here at that time of the day, because that's like 11 p.m. and we don't stay up that late, so I don't know what to tell you on that, but there was a jump there. Now on that December 13th one, this is pretty much standard. Even this one, it's pretty close to what's going on there. But then because there was no electric production by the solar, that's where my usage was at there. And that's that same 7 o'clock when we have breakfast, and it's about exactly the same amount, in the graph is this other one. Then obviously there's more things happening in the wintertime. You got furnace and who knows what all else that was on at that time. But because I wasn't producing any solar, I was buying it from the co-op at that point. Okay, next one. Don't let this confuse you too much. It's hard to read probably from there to really see what's going on. But it shows the month, the solar production, the co-op kilowatt hour usage, the solar usage, the total kilowatts used, and the net metering, and then what I sold back to the power cooperative there. The ones that are circled in red are the highs in that column, and the ones in yellow are the lows. So we went back to those other graphs that you looked at, and the highest production in that year was July. That's like 1,120,000 kilowatt hours or whatever there. And December it was only 415. The co-op usage was pretty high there in December too, which is obvious. In this one, this is just a little lower than what the July one was, 386. So that's all the electricity I used. Now, if you averaged it out, I'd probably use about 870 kilowatt hours per month. And this next one, this is the solar kilowatt hour usage there. So 423 was the highest, it was July, and 207 the lowest in December. And then the total one here is everything added up. So you add this, for instance, this 777 to this 223, and that's 1,000 kilowatt hours for the total. The net metering, I forgot how they, because I went to Meeker County and have them explain to me all these different things or whatever, but I can't remember exactly on that, and I didn't want to call them now because I didn't know that they'd remember it either. So we'll just kind of forget that for now. But the amount that I sold to the co-op is right there. So it was a low of $19.70 that would have been taken off of my bill in December, and the high was $67.62 taken off the bill. Now that really doesn't consider the times when I was producing electricity with the solar and I was using electricity. So that's kind of just a wash there. So that doesn't show up as a cost, but this is the actual dollar amount that they take off of my bill. Okay, does that make sense, kind of? So, okay. Next slide. This is a little cutout from my bill. And the top one there, kilowatt hour charge, and this is for October, month of October 2017. The charge was 515 kilowatt hours at 0.103 is their rate, and the kilowatt hour charge there's a negative in front of that. That's what I sold to them, 442 kilowatt hours. So I was pretty close to paying for all of my electricity there. But their charge of $10, and actually it's a little bit more than, 10 cents a kilowatt hour, They charge me that, but when I sell it to them, then it's like 0.095, so it's a couple cents basically less than what they're, and I guess I can't fault them too much on that. They have to make a buck somewhere or other. Yeah, that's right, yeah. So you have to keep that in mind, and I don't know what Wright County would do, or if you know either, but I don't know if that's something that they all do the same or whatever. Then what's kind of another thing here that's a fixed charge that everybody gets charged for is $35. So even if I had all my electric paid for, I'd still have to pay that 35 bucks. And that's gone up now to $43. And it was 35 back in 2018. Then they also charge me because I'm producing electricity for a qualifying facility fee, which is $8.88. Now, it was $9.87 at that bill in October of 2017. Then they have a power cost adjustment for the electricity they sold, and I don't know why they just don't put it in the other thing, but that adds another cent or so on to what the actual cost is. Garbage companies do the same thing. I don't know if you ever noticed that or not. At least our garbage company does too. They always got this cost adjustment thing there. Why don't you just put it in there? You know, why hide it someplace else? And then, of course, you have Minnesota sales tax. And then what Meeker County does as well is they have a roundup program, and the customers pay for it. You know, if they have a certain amount, they add it up, and then if it's, you know, in this case it was, I don't know what the amount was, but they rounded it up 91 cents, okay, so it must have been $67 and whatever, so, and 7 cents, so they rounded up 91, and then they take that money and then they give it to different organizations within the county, so they get some PR out of it, and whatever, and it's probably a good thing that some of this goes to a helpful cause, but it's actually the customers that are paying for it. You can opt out of it if you want to, but it's anything less than $1, so I guess I didn't get too excited about it. Just in general, May through September, in 2022 and 2023 so far, 5 months I've generated more electricity than I've consumed. And a lot of times it's pretty darn close. The lowest bill that I ever had is $15. That's the total bill for my electric bill. And if you add up these fixed costs that they have, that amounts to like $61 or whatever here. I had it added up. So in actuality, you know, the fixed charge is more than the electrical charge. So I don't know how you can get around that unless you got a bigger system and, you know, can bring that cost down. Other things, and I'm not sure if Wright County would do this, when you put in something like this, you lose some of the co-op incentives, like smart meters and that sort of thing. And I was going to put in for a rebate on the heat pump that we put in, a mini split, a year or so ago. But again, because we had the solar, we weren't able to take advantage of that. Otherwise, that would have amounted like $500 or something to put that in. So. Got a bunch of notes and things written up here, but I think we've covered just about everything. So let's see, this is a more current bill where the costs have changed there, and the kilowatt hour charge, say, has gone up. What we did in the previous month here, from February 28th to March 31st, the kilowatt hour charge was 741 kilowatt hours at 0.103, which amounted to $76.32. And the amount that I sold them was 578 kilowatt hours at 9.5 cents. So, and that amounted to a deduction of my bill by $55. So in effect, I paid $21.90 for the electricity, but then you got $66.10, all those fixed charges. So my bill ended up at $87, but the bulk of that was the fixed charge. Okay, well that's about it. Rush through it here, but hopefully you got a little bit of an idea. And if anybody has any questions, like I say, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Yes?
Figured out what your payback time? Have you figured out how long it would take to pay your whole labor costs?
You know, probably 10 to 15 years. You know, but again, it depends on how much the sun shines and how much the electric costs go up and whatever, but that's usually what they figure in general, like that. So, but if the panels last for 20, 25 years, you know, then you're kind of home free after that. And the fact that you're producing basically pollution-free electricity. Certainly it costs something to make the panels and, you know, the posts and all that sort of thing, but once they're in, they're going to last longer than I will. So, yes?
So you mentioned that the consultant or the installer that you use had said that you would produce 90% of your own electricity. Was there a reason that they didn't size the system to do 100%?
You know, I've got a hearing problem in the echo. I wasn't able to catch all of that, so.
Was there a reason that you didn't go 100% on your power needs rather than 90%? Like if they came up to measure your needs and determine this is how much you use.
It was the basic.
Size the system so that you were selling more back.
It was the spot I had available.
Okay.
You know, if I went too much the other way, I'd be going down a hill, and that would have presented a problem to get everything evened out. So, well, 90% is close enough. You know. And actually, I've thought about maybe putting in a little bit more, but I'll have to check and see, because they up the charges if you produce more than a certain amount of electricity too, on those some of those fees. So, we'll see if it's worth it or not. Yeah. Well, I guess they have to make their money too, but I'm not dissatisfied with the system. It'd be nice if I could make a little bit more, but it has been, you know, very foolproof. Nothing other than, say, brush a little snow off, and that doesn't happen too often. So.
Do you have battery backup?
No, and that would probably double the cost.
So if the grid goes down, you don't have electricity.
That's right. Yep. And that, I was well aware of that, and even before that, I had a generator, 6,500 watt gas generator, and we've only used that a couple of times, and there's probably about, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago or so, there was one period in the summertime where a big storm came through the county, and our power was out for like 27 hours. And the thing that bothers me most is the fact that, especially in the summertime with the cattle and water, and if it's real hot, you know, you're going to lose a lot of animals perhaps there without, you know, able to give them some water. So have it for that reason. I use it then. Of course, it doesn't have to run all the time, and we ran it periodically to keep the freezers and everything, you know, from starting to thaw. And if I did it again, I think I would go with propane, because gasoline degrades, even though, you know, I usually have some gas around, but It's just a little more of a hassle to deal with. And they do make some units now that I think are fairly reasonably priced that you can hook up to your system there, and they come on automatically when the power goes out. And that 6,500 watt will cover our freezer, refrigerator, microwave, septic, furnace, pretty much in the well, those basic kinds of things there. You may not be able to run them all at once, but I've got a transfer switch in the basement so I could run one for a while and get things up to speed with there and then switch it over to something else. But it's probably a good idea to have regardless, if you have a home and you're trying to, prevent major disasters. So, anything else?
No, any of my questions that I had were covered by others.
Okay. I guess one thing I would do if you're going to think about doing it is at least get a couple of different estimates. First off, do your own research, look online and check some things, talk to other folks, and if you want to call me for some question, I can't guarantee I'll know the answer, but I'd be happy to do that as well. There's a lot of information online, as long as you can trust the source, that you can get a pretty good idea on what it is, and then have people come out and give you some estimates. The business that I had do this is called Solar Farm. You can look up their website, Solar Farm LLC, and I was happy with them. I also contacted one of those bigger outfits out of the city, and just in talking to them, it just didn't seem quite right, what they were trying to tell me. And one of the things I learned as a detective is that you always ask a few questions that you know the answer to, and when they start giving you BS, and oh, this isn't right, so just be cautious, get some references. Usually they had references and stuff posted on their website, but even, call some people or whatever that do have solar. Okay, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's up for you.
Can I say a couple of things too? Another local installer to work with or person to talk to would be Hal Kimball. He's Doreen Erickson's son-in-law, and he's just right out of Buffalo, so he's another.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
What's that?
I wasn't aware of that, no.
Yeah, I just learned of that recently. The other thing is, and Dan, maybe current like refunds or credits, available.
I think they still, all I know of is, like Denny was saying, they had the tax credits.
Okay.
And that's all I know of. When it gets into the large solar farms, it's a whole different game.
Okay, sure.
And then they have incentives, or they have had incentives to help them put those up.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and then Jake South and Seth might be aware of other credit. I don't know if there are any other incentives that any newer ones. I don't know, but Jake South and Seth would definitely know next week too. A week from now. So yeah, May 2nd. In case you want to come to that, I'll give this to you, Dan.
Oh,
Should I turn this one off?
Unless you want to use that one.
I can use that one, yeah, I'll just.
Okay. Yeah.
And I get to sit down.
Let's see how far it might reach.
I can move it. You're all right. The cord was kind of stretched the way it is, so.
Yeah, it's kind of well enough.
You got it.
Okay.
I'm not totally handicapped.
No.
Can you hear me all right? One thing I wanted to do before I got into some of the ordinances around solar is when Denny put his system in, you know the difference between alternating current, AC, and direct current. Does everybody know the difference between that? Direct current is like two lines going straight, and that's kind of how direct current works. Alternating current goes kind of all over the place, but alternating current can travel long distances. That's why all your houses have alternating current, and the power companies have alternating current. So he converts his from DC current to alternating current. And where is your invert? You have an inverter for that?
No, I think it just gets pretty much put right in the line there.
Okay.
Because I can't, without an inverter, I couldn't, go directly to the house
Yep.
to convert, because I think the solar produces DC.
Yep.
So if they convert it in the transformer when it goes in, I couldn't tell you that, but I know I'd have to do that, and that's what adds a lot of the extra cost. And the fact is you have to have a battery for storage.
Okay, so the power company might take care of that then already.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now the exciting stuff when it comes to ordinances. The first thing I'm going to say about this is that when you decide you want to go solar, check out your ordinances for where you live. If you're in a city, talk to the city planning commissioner. If you're in the county or township, talk to your township first and then the county, because you don't know who's doing their planning and zoning, but they're going to be taking care of the ordinances. Secondly, Denny talked about the solar companies. A good solar company is going to take care of pulling your permits. And I'm pretty sure that's what happened with Denny. The solar company pulled all his permits, so he didn't have to deal with that. And for what Denny has in, according to ordinances, is called a solar system. In Meeker County, I have both ordinances printed out here for Meeker County and for Wright County, if you want to look at them. Meeker County, anything under 100 kilowatts is considered a solar system. So, and that's quite large. 100 kilowatts is quite large. But that's considered for a single dwelling or a farm. When you're going into a residential area like an R1 or an R2, they call it, the limits on what you can have for systems is going to be less than that 100 kilowatts. Wright County, it's 40 kilowatts. That's the maximum you can have in those districts. If you're in an ag district, you can go up to the 100 kilowatts. Wright County, you can go up to 200 kilowatts in the ag district. So if you've ever been south of town and have seen Turning Seeds with their solar array there, that's considered a solar system, but it is under 200 kilowatts, I believe. That was permitted through Stockholm Township because they have their own planning commission. So that the county didn't get involved with that at all. Back in 2015 or 16, I sat on the work group for Wright County that actually developed the ordinance for Wright County for solar. Most of that work group was focused around solar farms, so that's over 200 kilowatts. And those were mainly 1 megawatt to 5 megawatt. So to give you an idea, a 1 megawatt system will take up about 7 acres of land. So we were dealing with mostly the ordinances for the bigger solar farms like Harlan Anderson has out here north of town. If you go west and then north, you'll see solar fields out before the high school. Most of the ordinances deal like 85% with solar farms because it was really a controversial issue when it came into the counties. The reason that we developed the ordinances in Wright County was to try to get ahead of the game before all this came. And we were successful in that, getting ordinances in place so that they couldn't come in and do what they wanted to. For your purpose, you're going to be dealing with solar systems for the most part. Both ordinances, it's about 1 page. Pretty simple. It's pretty simple. Meeker County, you don't even, sometimes you'll need a conditional use permit, and that's where you have to pay a fee to go before the planning commission. Meeker County, for solar systems, they write all those administratively. You don't have to go before the commission. Wright County, it will vary depending on the size, the circumstances, and where you are. If you want to put in a bigger solar system than what is allowed in, say, a residential area, you're going to have to go before the planning commission, and they're going to have to grant a variance on that in order for that to happen. So it's a little more involved with that. But both of them, when you put in a solar system, the solar farms daylight on their permits. 30 years, they're done. And that's both Meeker County and Wright County. With a solar system, there is no daylight on that. That's there as long as the system is there. So if Denny were to sell his place, that system stays. You don't have to go back and re-permit it or anything. It's already done. And that's good news. It is, because there have been people trying to push, in our county, they've been trying to change that so that a new homeowner would have to re-permit it again. And that's not going to be the case. So I don't think there's a whole lot more to talk about with ordinances. It more has to do with where you live, because everybody's going to be dealing with a different situation. If you're on a half acre in a housing district, you're going to be dealing with a different situation than if you're on 10 acres out in the country. You know, there's going to be more permission for more to happen. If you are planning or want to look into doing that, like I said, the first thing to do is to contact them and get the ordinances up front. Meeker County, if you're in Meeker County, you can read it right on their website. They have their ordinance on the website. Go to the Planning Commission, bring up Code of Ordinances, and search solar ordinance. It should come right up. And that should be the same for Wright County also. Are there anybody in Carver County? Good. They're a little more restrictive down there. So, you know, that's really all I have. If you have any questions about solar and you know, how the administrations look at this, I'd be happy to answer that. I've been dealing with this for 9 years.
Does it matter whether you're an on-grid or off-grid system? Like, does the same ordinance apply if you're off-grid and not connecting into the...
No, most ordinances, they just require that both Meeker County and Wright County require that they be UL listed.
Okay.
So they have to be UL listed in order to be approved.
Okay, so it doesn't matter whether...
That's up to the power company.
But if you're going off-grid, right? Like if
Yep.
you're not tapping into the power grid, you're not grid tied or anything, is that...
The ordinances won't deal with that. From what I can read, they won't deal with that. They're going to deal with more the solar system itself. So if you're putting in, like when you go to present to the county, you, like I say, if they're putting in the system, they should be doing this for you. But they have to print a complete schematic of it and how the layout's going to be on that system. So if you're going to have battery storage, that's going to be included in that. Okay, so if you're going to be off-grid with battery storage, that would be included in that layout. Okay. Any other questions? Now they've gone, Denny.
Are there any restrictions with Meeker or Wright County so far as when you put it on a roof or you do
Okay, there's restrictions. Roof mount can't be any higher than the structure you put it on. If it's a standalone system, if it's in a residential district, it's 15 feet maximum tilt. So whatever your maximum tilt is, it's 15 feet high, that's it. If you're in a rural ag district, it's 20 feet. So there's a difference in that. That's just not on the roof, so that's to the top of your panel. You know, there's like turnings out here south of town, they have what's called a tracking system. So that tracks with the sun. And I believe that maximum on that was 25 feet when they put that in. And now it's been lowered to 20 feet for Wright County, so. Because those get, when they're at their maximum tilt, they'll be pretty high in the air. Okay. Josh looks like he's chomping at the bit there, ready to ask a question, but he's an engineer, so he knows it all.
Most of my questions are, I think so far, all the questions I've had, it's an easy out for me, but I've heard answers to pretty much everything I've had questions for so far.
Good. So that's all I have, and I'm gonna set these ordinances up here, if you wanna read them, feel free. They're not very difficult, and this is a paper I printed out on the difference between AC and DC current, if you wanna look at that.